Hey everybody, Kennedy Hawk from the MCM team here. Welcome to another new player episode in the month of January 2023. We're going to do a series of 4 episodes all about deck building, crafting your decks in Marvel Champions, and this is mostly going to be for newer players, but hopefully some older players can learn some tips here and give people tips in the comments as well. So this is going to be a series of 4 videos in our new Shield guide, our new player guide that we're going to try to kick off every January and update as time goes on. So in these deck building videos, we're going to go through 4 videos, one every 5 to 6 days this month in January. The first one is going to be all about multiplayer deck building basics. So that's what we're going to focus on in today's video. But if you tune in again next week, we're going to go into multi-deck combo building, and I'll show you how on marvelcdb you can build like a 2-player deck that's really focused on having good synergy between the decks, which is something we're not going to cover in today's video. In the third video, we'll talk about solo deck building basics, what changes when considering a multiplayer deck versus a solo deck, and then eventually we'll talk about solo advanced deck building for combos, deck building for rush, deck building for tempo, and do a roundup of all the deck building tactics we talked about this month. So let's get into multiplayer deck building and just deck building basics in general. So decks in Marvel Champions should be 40 to 50 cards. That's the legal card size for a deck according to the RRG. They include 15 identity-specific cards and then 25 to 35 aspect and basic cards. Typically, decks should include 5 to 7 allies and 5 to 7 basic cards, but there's a couple other 5 to 7 staple basic cards. There's a couple other things I can give you as tips for general deck building. Definitely include 5 plus allies. Once you get really, really good at the game, it's totally possible to make decks that include no extra allies or maybe just 3 allies, especially protection decks that are all about, surviving the onslaught that the villain throws at you. But to start with, you're going to want lots of allies to absorb those villain activations so that you can learn the basics, the ins and outs of the games, what cards are good, what cards are maybe slightly below efficiency, but still fun. Try to include more low-cost cards than high-cost cards. If you think about it, if you have a hand of 6 cards and every card in your deck costs 5, that means you get to make 1 decision every turn. But if the villain puts out 2 things, say they put out a minion that you have to attack and defeat and a side scheme because somehow they surged into 2 cards, then if you can only play one thing, that one thing has to be able to do solve multiple problems. But if you have lots of cards that cost 0, 1, and 2, then with a 6-card hand size, even if they all cost 2, right, then you can do 2 things. So you can play a thwart card and you can play an attack card. Or you can build your board and defeat a minion. If things cost 1, 0, and 2, you can even get crazy and do 3, 4, 5, maybe even 6 things with card draw during your turn. So the more low-cost things you can do that are good, the better. That being said, don't just only include 0-cost cards, because it might not congeal as a deck. So you want to be intelligent with your deck building, but try not to cram in too many high-cost cards unless you have a hero that can support that. Next, include a suite of basic staples, which I talked about on the last slide. And we'll go through exactly what I think I would recommend with the core set as a basic set of staples for multiplayer. But generally, with every deck you run, you're going to run Energy Genius Strength. I honestly think with every deck that exists, with every hero, there is no disadvantage for using Nick Fury and Mockingbird. Hawkeye obviously can't use Mockingbird. Maybe they lose some trait synergy, but these are staple basic cards that are pretty much never going to hurt you. Alright, in solo, you're probably going to want to make a well-rounded deck, and we'll talk about that more in the solo deck building problem or video. But what I mentioned earlier about with cards in your hand, right, being able to solve multiple things that come out of the encounter deck, you're going to take the same approach in solo. You never know what the villain's going to throw at you, so if you make a deck that's all about defeating minions and has no thwart and no survivability, if the villain surges into multiple attacks, or if the villain throws out a bunch of side schemes, you're kind of hosed because you're waiting for minions to come out for your deck to function. So in solo, you typically want to have a deck that has, lots of different solutions into it, so on any given turn you draw into the right solution for what the villain throws at you. In multiplayer, it can be a little bit different. You can make a 1-2 focus deck, and what I mean is pick 2 focuses for your deck. Ideally, 1 focus for your deck. Maybe I'm going to be a thing that defeats minions, and then as soon as the minions are dead, I throw my damage at the villain. Or I'm going to be a thing that makes sure there are no side schemes and there's never a worry about lost threat for my team. So figure out what the focuses are going to be of your deck. Pick 1 to 2 of those and focus your deck around it. So for today, we're just going to talk about your deck and picking focuses for it. But in the next video, we're going to be talking about, okay, what if there's 2 decks and I'm building both of them, or me and my friend are building a deck? There's another check you probably want to do to make sure you're not both picking the same focus, because then you've just built a really non-well-rounded team, right? So what I like to think about in multiplayer is when I'm building a deck, I'm not just building one deck, I'm building like a giant solo deck across multiple 40 card decks. All right, so steps to building a great deck in Marvel Champions. I think there are 6 key steps you need to take to build an awesome deck in MC. So the first thing you want to do is develop a goal or plan, and we'll go through each of these steps individually here in a few minutes. So I'm just going to read the highlights, but pick what your goal is going to be. Typically your goal is winning, right? But if you're going to build a deck against a certain villain, or if you're going to build a deck with a certain combo in mind, you want to figure out what that goal is. Next, you're going to pick a hero and analyze their kit and find a hero that helps support your goal. If you want to be a thwarting character, you probably don't want to take, in multiplayer, a hero that's not very good at thwarting, because that's not going to help meet your goal. You're going to add those shield staples to your deck and figure out how many more cards you have left to pick from, and then pick whatever aspect makes sense based on your goal. And lots of different aspects can do lots of different things. I think every aspect now has a card that supports defeating of minions or gives you a bonus for defeating a minion. So don't feel like all minion defeating decks have to be aggression. That just might be the obvious choice. So pick an aspect and then start figuring out what cards fit into your deck. Sometimes when I'm building a deck, I always, in the gameplay tips on the intro Shield Agent video this month, I said try to keep your deck to 40 cards. I still agree with that, but a lot of times when I'm building a deck, I'll end up with 43, 45, 46 cards. And then I'll have to test and tweak my deck and cut down if necessary. So I might start with a 43 card deck, I'll play it a bunch of times, and then I'll say, hey, these 3 cards I never used. So let's get into the details just a little bit on each of these steps. So you want to develop a goal or plan. So you want to ask yourself a couple questions. What do you want your deck to do, right? Is your deck for solo or multiplayer? Like we talked about, that's going to determine if you need to be well-rounded, if you can be focused. You can still play multiplayer with a bunch of well-rounded decks, and that'll work very well. Is there a certain path to victory for my deck? Am I going to make a rush deck where I'm just ignoring all hazards and all things that come up and taking it to the villain's face? Or am I going to do a tempo deck where I'm making calculated decisions about what's on the board and then when I can push villain damage? Or am I going to do a control deck where I'm just clearing the board every turn and then only pushing villain damage when I'm already guaranteed to win? In this video, what my goal is I want to make 4 multiplayer decks from one core set of Marvel Champions, where each hero gets to highlight their strength. So I'm going to make a focus deck where I'm going to pick the focus of the deck based on the hero. So with Spider-Man, I might pick something that is super into defending or something like that. So that's going to be my goal for today's video. All right, so next we're going to select a hero and analyze. So I'm building out of the core set, so I have 5 heroes as my choices. For Black Panther, right, some of the things about him, he requires some setup, so he might need, allies or thwarting to keep him afloat for a while in solo, but in multiplayer, we can count on other people for that. He's kind of good at everything, but he's kind of great at nothing. So the one thing he's really great at is spending a lot of money, right? Spending vibranium. One problem with Black Panther is that variance can really slow down your deck, so anything we can do to decrease that variance is going to help us. Captain Marvel requires a large investment in one resource type to really optimize around some of her energy abilities, but it's not essential to make her deck super function. She has a lot of energy built into her kit. Again, we've got big money. She does have low AoE and minion control, but since we're building in multiplayer, that's probably a thing that we can count on, the aggression player to work up. She's optimized with lots of flipping. You really want to use that commander ability on her as much as possible. So again, allies, thwarting, really good for Captain Marvel. Iron Man. Iron Man needs a lot of setup. He often sits in alter ego for a few turns. So in multiplayer, that's going to shore up that weakness and really let us focus on getting to that crazy, crazy final form for Iron Man. So to do that, we're going to be dependent on getting only a specific resource types in our deck if possible. Spider-Man, he's got low thwart capability. We know that, right? But that just means we probably won't be putting him into justice if we want to highlight his strength. His survivability is super high, and we could make a hero that never leaves hero form, which would be really helpful to the team in reducing how much threat is placed. She-Hulk, again, optimized really, really well when flipping a lot. You want to be able to use that flip ability, the Do You Even Lift, as many times as possible. Her thwarting requires alter ego, so if we were to shore up her weakness for a solo deck, we might include Justice. Her low hand size and hero form can be a problem, so we're going to need help from the team to get our ramp and our cost curve set up and running. All right, so we know what the heroes are for the core set. For each of these heroes, I'm going to include probably some sort of Shield Agent Basics. What I recommend when you're building decks in the core set for multiplayer for your Shield Agent Basics is to include Nick Fury, Mockingbird, Energy, Genius, Strength, and Helicarrier. And you could say Avengers Mansion as a 7th card. Avengers Mansion is a 4-cost card. It's a support that comes into play. You can exhaust it to pick a player and pass them a card. Super awesome multiplayer card. But 4 cost is really expensive, right? That's basically a hero's entire turn. With She-Hulk, sometimes you can't even afford it if you draw into it. So I don't think that Avengers Mansion really needs to go in every multiplayer deck, but every hero can play Helicarrier pretty much just from the get-go if they draw into it, and it's only going to help the table. So I recommend these 6 cards. You've got 2 allies to seed your 5 ally-ish goal, 5 plus ally-ish. I would say 5 is the minimum. And you've got some ramp for the whole table in Helicarrier, and your Energy, Genius, Strength, just because those are great cards. There's very little reason not to include them. All right, so we're going to pick an aspect for each of these heroes. And again, we want to highlight their strength. So with Black Panther, I think Leadership can show off Shuri and remove some of his variants because he can fish out Shuri multiple times. And Shuri is an ally in Black Panther's kit. She reads Response. After Shuri enters play, search your deck and upgrade for an upgrade and add it to your hand, and then shuffle your deck. So 2-cost ally that you can recur with Leadership seems pretty good. Captain Marvel, I think she also is really highlighted in Leadership, even more so once we get to the full card pool, but it can really show Carol's ability to draw cards and just spam them into play so that we always have allies to defend ourselves against the villain. For Iron Man, I'm going to try to build him in Justice to show off Iron Man's 2 Thwart, since he has an in-kit ready, and we'll talk about what that card is when we do our actual live deck build. That means once we get our +1 Thwart upgrade onto Iron Man, he's going to be able to thwart for 6 a turn without doing anything from his hand. That's pretty crazy, and Justice has a lot of really good energy cards, especially in the core set only, to really set up his Repulsor Blast. Spider-Man, I'm going to choose Protection for Spider-Man to highlight his survivability and his ability to maintain hero form. I'm going to try to set up Spider-Man so that he can defend for multiple characters and do lots of control-y things for the team. And then She-Hulk, I'm going to choose Aggression. She-Hulk, we want to let her do what she does best, which is 1-2 punch. She has lots of in-kit readies. They're all triggered after attacking, so if we can get +1 attacks onto her, that's only going to be good. That being said, since this is multiplayer, other players could play +1 attacks onto her, and Carol might even be able to do that in some sort of A-Force team-up kind of way. Alright, so next we would test and tweak. I'm not going to play the game in this video, but I'm going to do at least 1 or 2 two-handed videos with some of these decks this month. So I would test these decks a couple times, change the card balances if there's cards that seem to never work out for me, or see if there's better choices. Now, in the core set, there's not a ton of choices you get to make, but there are still choices you get to do about which cards to include and which cards not to. So maybe what we'll do is we'll suggest after we play them and tweak those decks, what's one expansion I would buy to increase this deck's value. So you're going to figure out which cards you like, which cards you typically use as resources, and cut down to 40 cards if possible. A lot of times I'll even do like a test draw. I'll shuffle up my 40 card deck, draw my alter ego hand, take my mulligan, play out my first turn, and then draw my 5 hero cards at the end of the turn. So I've gone through those initial 17 cards and said, okay, how did my first turn go? Was it just like a complete whiff, or did like really, really good things happen and I feel like I'm set up for a good villain phase? Not even playing like a full game, but just like one hero phase can tell you a lot of information. Alright, so now we are going to go to the table. I'm going to get my camera set up. I've split off all the cards from my core set here on the table, and we will do a live deck build of 4 of these heroes. So I know I said Black Panther and Captain Marvel can go in Leadership. I'm probably going to build just Carol for today, but really this deck will probably work with either of them. Hey everybody, we are back. We got everything set up here, and we are good to go to build our 4 Marvel Champions core set decks. So we are going to go ahead and build these just like we said in the video. So I'm going to eliminate Black Panther from my choices because I said I was going to do Captain Marvel with Leadership. So let's take the Leadership and Captain Marvel cards and place them over here. We're going to do She-Hulk and Aggression. Again, let's get those out of the way so we can start looking through things. We're going to do Spider-Man and Protection. Just placing these slightly off camera so we get as much space as possible for looking at these wonderful cards. And then we are going to do Iron Man Justice here as our first deck. So let me get things up and underway, and we're going to follow our deck building pattern. So the first thing we're going to do is decide what the goal of our deck is. So for this Iron Man Justice deck, our goal is going to be to take advantage of Iron Man's basic 2 Thwart, and his in-kit ready. So he has this arc reactor, which is a 2-cost upgrade, exhaust arc reactor to ready Iron Man, and do a bunch of good stuff. So remember, Iron Man has a hand size of 6 in alter ego form, and he has an action to like get extra cards into his hand. When he flips, he has a hand size of 1, but +1 for each tech upgrade. So we're going to want to be able to stay in hero or alter ego form for a while, and we'll be able to help make up that deficit with our 6 per turn thwart, because we'll be able to thwart for 3, ready, and thwart for 3 again. So I'm super excited to do that in Justice. The other thing we're going to try to do is also think about how we're going to progress the win condition of our team. And that's going to be focusing on these 3 events right here, Repulsor Blast. So Repulsor Blast is an event. It says hero action attack. Deal 1 damage to an enemy, discard the top 5 cards of your deck. For each printed lightning bolt resource or energy resource discarded this way, deal 2 additional damage to the enemy. So if you discard energy, the basic resource card, let me find it here, energy, you'd get 2 energy resources, and then you could discard 4 more cards that each have 1 energy. That'd be 13 damage for 1 resource, which is super efficient. So our goal is to build this Iron Man deck, and here we go. So we've selected our hero, we've chosen our goal. We're going to focus on Repulsor Blast, so lots of energy resources, and we're going to focus on increasing Iron Man's thwart capability. So within Iron Man's kit, we've already, just looking through it, we've got more than enough tech upgrades to get to our full tech size. Now, in future deck building, you'll also get the option of other tech upgrades, which is even better to get there faster. But using the core set only, we're just going to use the ones he has built in. We've got a couple energy resources with Supersonic Punch, so I think what I'm going to do is count how many energy resources I have, and then I've got my 3 Repulsor Blasts. So I'm not going to count Arc Reactor and the Gauntlets, because I want to get those in play to get Iron Man going. So far we have 2 energy resources looking just at Iron Man's kit. And we decided we're going to go with Justice, but the next thing to do, right, is to include our Shield Agent Basics, because we need to get to, this is going to be our energy pile, but we need to get to 25 cards down here. So we're going to include a Strength, a Genius and an Energy. Now, I've seen people make Repulsor Blast decks where they remove these 2, but within the core set, I think you really need all 3 to keep things going. We're going to include a Nick Fury, even though he has a mental resource, and a Mockingbird, because they're just really good allies. They're unique, so you can only have one of them, which is a bit of a bummer. For the other Shield Agent Basics, at least, or like the ones that I would include in almost every character's deck, I am going to put an Avengers Mansion and Helicarrier into Iron Man's deck. He has the economy to support that Avengers Mansion eventually, so I'm really happy to include that. So at this point, we've got, 7 cards placed in our deck just from basics. So let's go ahead and look through the Justice cards that we have as an option. So we've got copies of Power of Justice. We can think about that. Those double the amount of resources they provide when paying for a Justice card. That being said, we've already included 7 basic cards and 15 Iron Man cards. So at most, we're going to have 18 Justice cards. We need to see how much they cost to decide if that's worth it or not. We want to get to as many allies as possible. So we have 1 on Iron Man's kit and our 2 basics. So I'm going to go ahead and include a Daredevil and a Jessica Jones, and we'll count those energy resources here at the end. So we've got Daredevil and Jessica Jones, kind of high costing. Surveillance Team is the support. You can use 3 counters, Exhausted to remove 1 counter, to remove 1 threat from a scheme. So that's basically 2 resources to remove 3 threat really slowly. It does thin your deck and it provides a mental resource, but I don't think it's quite worth it for Iron Man, so I'm going to set those aside for now in our maybe pile over here with Power of Justice. Alright, Interrogation Room. Here's a weird one. So it is max 1 per player with a location. After you defeat a minion, exhaust, interrogation, remove, and 1 threat from the main scheme. We will be defeating minions when we get to our final form. We can take them out with our gauntlets. It's max 1 per player, and I can only play it on myself, but it provides an energy resource. So I'm, again, going to put that in the maybe pile. Putting a lot of things in maybe. Here's one we can definitely get rid of. Great Responsibility. Hero Interrupt. When any amount of threat will be placed on a scheme, you take that as damage instead. So this can make Iron Man go aerial using his boots because it provides a mental resource. But I'm going to put this off screen in my reject pile because I don't think we want to really flip down once we flip up. And we will have a high health pool. But if we're preventing threat, then we don't get to show off our cool stuff. And that seems super not Tony Stark. Alright, we've got 3 copies of For Justice. It's a hero thwart, remove 3 threat from a scheme for 2, but it immediately removes the threat instead of slowly, like a Surveillance Team does. If you pay with a mental, it's 4 threat instead, and it provides an energy resource. That seems like a no-brainer. Let's include it. And Heroic Intuition, we definitely want to include this because it's going to increase Iron Man's thwart to 2. Normally, I would only include 2 copies of this because I really want to get Iron Man to 3 thwart, so if I have to discard one as a resource to play a tech upgrade, I don't want to have to cycle my deck looking for it. But with core set only cards and it providing an energy resource, I'm going to include 3. So I'm up to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. We need 10 more cards in this puppy. And I think I'm feeling the interrogation rooms here. I know I won't be able to play all of them, but at the end of the day, I want cards in my deck for Repulsor Blast, so having a couple extras aren't going to hurt me. And let's check and see how many energy resource cards we have right now that we think are going to be floating around in our deck. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 energy cards. I think we want to make that a little bit bigger. Let's check Power of Justice triggers really quick. I like to have 7 triggers to include 2 copies of a Power of event, meaning that I'll likely draw into a card that will actually proc it. So we've got 1, 2, 3, and that'll do the resource matching for 4 Justice, so I like that. We can play these on other players, but we can also leave them in our deck as energy resources. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4. We've got 8 cards that trigger them, so I'm going to put 1 copy in for now. And then let's recount our deck and reject Surveillance Team for now and keep that last power of as it may be. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19. So we need 6 more cards. We're going to go back to Basic Land because there are more basic cards we could include. We took all the supports, allies, and resources that we're probably going to want, but there's a couple other cards in here. We could include a Tenacity, but we don't have a ton of physical resources to ready ourselves to use that last 3 thwart, and that's like 3 resources for 3 thwart, which seems pretty bad. I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to include 3 copies of Haymaker and 3 copies of Emergency. These are both basic events that provide a lightning bolt resource. Haymakers just deal 3 damage to an enemy, so that can help us trigger Interrogation Room. Also can sit in our deck as an energy resource. And Emergency is going to let us help right at the beginning, preventing threat when the villain schemes while we sit in Alter Ego. So not a bad card to draw into. Should we check our total one more time? I completely forgot what number we were at. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25. We're at 25, so we can get rid of that last Power of Justice. We've got a ton of cards with energy resources. So like if we look at our deck, over 50% of the cards that aren't Iron Man's armor that we're going to want out there are energy resources, which is really, really good. Just tell by the heights of the decks. So I'm going to lay the deck out here really quick. We're going to have Iron Man and his 15 cards. We included Nick Fury and Mockingbird as allies, Helicarrier and Avengers Mansion. We had all 3 basic resources and 1 copy of Power of Justice. Random Iron Man cards over here. To flesh out our allies, we have Daredevil and Jessica Jones, so we're at our 5 ally minimum, which isn't too bad. For Lightning Bolts, we've got 3 Interrogation Room, 3 for Justice, 3 Heroic Intuition, 3 Haymaker, and 3 Emergency, which are going to be floating around in our deck to provide lots of Repulsor Blasts. Now, like I said, I like to sort of play through a hand to see how things are going to play out. So with Iron Man, what I like to know is how many tech upgrades can I get out in one turn? Now, in the core set, you don't have extra tech upgrades to include to sort of increase that. If I were to buy a pack to increase or help out this Iron Man deck, I would probably buy the Venom pack. I'm trying to remember what allies come in Venom, and I'm drawing a blank, but what does come in Venom is a Sonic Rifle, which is an aspect card for Justice that is also a tech upgrade that lets you confuse the villains, that lets you even more help out with your thwarting and get to that 6 pieces of tech upgrade faster. So I'm just shuffling my deck over here off camera as much as I can. And then we're going to play through that first turn and that first mulligan and just see how something like that plays out. This is something I do with almost every deck I build, is just see how quickly can I get things up and running. So I'm going to draw my initial hand of 6 cards, and then I get to take my mulligan. So I'm not going to hold on to an emergency. I'm going to spend out my whole resources. So we're going to discard that. We do have 2 tech upgrades we can play, but I don't need to keep that interrogation room. I'd rather dig a little bit deeper and see if I can get one more tech upgrade. I can't, but I get a Stark Tower, which isn't too bad. So this is my opening hand. Tony has a Futurist ability. It's look at the top 3 cards of your deck, add 1 to your hand, and discard the others. So we could grab a Pepper right here. I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab a Rocket Boots so that we can start off this Stark Tower train. So we're going to spend 2 to play Stark Tower. We're going to spend our Rocket Boots to play Mark V Helmet, and then we'll Stark Tower to return those Rocket Boots to our hand. We would spend Genius on Powered Gauntlets and Haymaker on Rocket Boots, and now if we wanted to flip, we'd be up to a 4-card hand size right away. We could still thwart for 1, 2, 3, and then punch for 1, which isn't too bad. I would probably, in multiplayer especially, sit in Alter Ego for 1 more turn, so I get 6 more cards. And it looks like here I'd be able to, what would we probably do? We'd probably pay 3, well, we would Futurist. So let's just think through the Futurist here. Let's add Mockingbird. And what we would probably do is pay 1, 2, 3 for Mockingbird to stun an enemy. Stark Tower, the Powered Gauntlets back to our hand. Let's pay with Jessica Jones, I guess. We could pay 2 for the Powered Gauntlets, and we'd have 1 card that we could hold. If we could get another resource from anybody else, we could play an Interrogation Room. We're now up to a 5-card hero hand size, which is normal for everybody else. We're probably ready to flip and start rocking and rolling in the game. So not too bad with just 1 shuffle and deck draw. So I'm going to set this Iron Man deck aside, because when we do a stream later this month, we are going to use some of these new player core set decks and see how they work out. So we should move on to the next deck, and I'm trying to figure out which one I want to do next. And I think we're going to go ahead and do Spider-Man Protection. He's the furthest off camera here. So hopefully everybody's sort of following along with what I'm doing here. Hopefully it's useful to you all. Let me know in the comments below. Love getting comments and talking with people about the game. I'm more active on Discord than I am on my YouTube channel comments, but I'm trying to get a little bit better at that. So feel free to yell at me, I'll remember. So with Peter Parker, our goal is to never dip back to Alter Ego form. We want to flip up and take advantage of this 3 defense. He's got lots of great cards in his kit to help mitigate damage, so he can face tank something and backflip for himself. He can then defend for another player in multiplayer and really mitigate that villain phase. He's perfect for protection. He's got things like Enhanced Spider Sense, which is a hero interrupt when a treachery card is revealed. Cancel its when revealed effects. Really good. He's got 2 copies of that. He's got 2 copies of backflip. He's got Webbed Up, which could really eliminate more hero activations. So if you webbed up the villain, he is canceled his attack against the first hero, and then against the second hero, it'll absorb a stun. The third hero might be Spider-Man, who he can soak with backflip, and then he can defend for the 4th hero, and he's just defended for the entire table in 1 turn, just within his hero kit, which is crazy. He's also got Black Cat, which is less important to him right now, and it's going to be more important to Captain Marvel, because Black Cat is one of the few allies out there that does not have consequential damage on attacking. So we're going to focus on Spidey's kit here and see what we can do. So our goal is to enhance that 3 defense and make it so he can defend for as many people as possible, as often as possible. So again, we're going to include our basic shield training cards. That's a Mockingbird, a Avengers Mansion, a Helicarrier, a Nick Fury, an Energy, a Genius, and a Strength. So we've got 7 cards in right off the bat. I'll try not to count for you all too much, because I know you all can count. Alright, so let's look through the protection cards that we have as an option. So we've got Power Protection, and I am a big fan of Power Protection with the expanded card pool, but I'm not in the core set, and this is why. If I look through the cards that come in the Marvel Champions core set, you're going to notice something here. There's not a lot of cards that cost 2 or more. In fact, there's only 5 cards, and this card takes a long time to get back into your discard pile. It's not cycling a ton of times. So there's a very low chance you're actually going to proc this. Now, it is a wild resource, so if I'm playing Iron Man, that can proc for 2 different things, or Captain Marvel, but with Spider-Man, that doesn't make much sense to me. So we're going to remove that as an option right away. We're going to try to get to our 5 ally limit, even though we're playing defense. We'd love to have more allies, so that'll be Luke Cage and Black Widow, which are great control characters for the villain phase anyway. I think I'm going to include 3 copies of Get Behind Me, which is a card I don't play a ton of, but I've been playing a lot more of recently. It's a hero interrupt. When a treachery card is revealed from the encounter deck, cancel its when revealed effects, the villain attacks you instead. Spider-Man loves to have extra attacks because he draws extra cards, and he's going to have this big stout defense. So we're going to include 3 copies of Get Behind Me. It's also a mental resource to go with Black Cat, a card we could draw into with her. Let's go ahead and include 3 copies of Armored Vest. Now again, I would normally only include 2, and I would include 2 because it's a big deal to get Spider-Man's events to 4 instead of 3. If you include 1, it could be the bottom card in your deck, or you could be forced into using it as a resource early on. With 2, you're probably going to get to play it the first pass through your deck. With 3, you might have too many of them, but you could play this on Captain Marvel if she ends up playing her helmet. You could play this on She-Hulk and get her up to 3 defense and thin your deck. So not a big deal to include 3 of that stat buff, especially when playing coreset only. I'm going to include 3 copies of this card, Indomitable. It is an upgrade, a condition, response after your hero defends, discard Indomitable to ready your hero. You're going to try to use that as little as possible and depend on backflips plus a base defense to defend for 2+ people. But if you can defend for 3+, Indomitable is even better, and they stack on the board. You can play 3 of them and then trigger 1, and then trigger another one, and sort of go around the whole table. I really like Med Team, but Med Team is a very expensive card. So Med Team is a 3-cost support, uses 3 medical counters, enters play with 3 counters. When those are gone, discard this card. Exhaust Med Team to remove 1 medical counter and heal 2 damage from a character. Always best on allies, but even here in coreset, we could use it on heroes, and it wouldn't be too bad. I'm going to count cards really quick, even though I promised I wouldn't. 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17. So we need 7 more cards. I'm not going to include Med Team because I think there's better choices out there. So let's go ahead and set the Med Teams aside. I am going to include 3 copies of Counterpunch because that way we get to progress a little bit as we're defending, right? We're using a lot of our actions for defending and not our 2 attack. Counterpunch is a 0 cost. When your hero defends against an enemy attack, deal your printed attack to that enemy. And let's go back to basic land and see what we can get to finish things out here. We aren't that short, right? We're pretty close. I'm deciding First Aid is a really attractive card to Spider-Man. It sort of replaces Med Team. It's a little bit less efficient, but at the same time, we can actually play it. We've got 1 Emergency left from our kit. We've got 1 Haymaker. Decision making is real hard right now. And I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to include 2 copies of First Aid. I think that's the best answer for Spider-Man for now, because that should put us to 40 if I remember right. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's 10, 15, 20, 23. Did I do math way wrong here somewhere? I must have left something out that I meant to include. I guess we could go back and include Med Team. If we're including First Aid, we could just become like this healing mecca. Now that makes me wonder, do I want to include a power of protection? But looking at my cost curve, I have a feeling the answer is no still. We've only got 4 things that it would trigger on. I don't think that's enough to include it in my mind. So let's lay out the Spider-Man deck we built here. We did throw 2 Med Teams in at the end. So for allies, we've got Luke Cage and Black Widow. We've also obviously got our Mockingbird and our Nick Fury. We've got our 3 basic resources. We have Avengers Mansion and Helicarrier. We want to get those out for sure. And then we've got Med Team, which we can reduce with Helicarrier, so it's not too bad. We've got 3 copies that Get Behind Me to create more attacks for us to be the superstar. We've got Indomitables to help us defend for the table, Armored Vest to help us support other people, but also increase our survivability. We've got 3 copies of Counterpunch to push a little bit of win condition in case we need to, and then First Aids to heal us in a pinch and help us maintain hero form. So I'm pretty happy with that. Let's see what we can do and how many attacks we think we'd be able to defend when we shuffle and play through our first turn. See how far we can get into our deck with Peter Parker using our Scientist ability instead of Iron Man's Futurist. So just giving myself a good shuffle over here on the side. We are running really low on basic cards here, so these last couple people are going to have to use a few more aspect cards than we have previously. to make sure we can get there. We did use quite a few basic cards in Iron Man with 3 Haymakers and 3 Emergencies, so I don't feel too bad. But it definitely looks like we got to focus a little bit more. All right, so I'm going to draw my opening hand here and see what we would get rid of. All right, now I don't want to keep Med Team this early. I don't want to keep Counterpunch this early because I don't want to hold on to anything that makes me sit on a card at the end of my turn. I want to be able to spend out my full hand and get a ton of things out there. I also don't want to keep Spider Tracer because there's going to be no minions out, but we'll keep Strength and Web Shooters and see what else we can draw. So here's our opening 6. It's really hard for me to pass up on Aunt May. If I do have to flip down, she's a really good card. But I think what we're initially going to do is we're going to use an Indomitable, a Strength, and Peter's Scientist ability to play Avengers Mansion. We could use that to have ourselves draw a card for this first turn. So we can now play our Web Shooters. We'll flip up, and it looks like we are going to get rid of Aunt May because I want to defend for as many people as I can, keeping 3 counters and Web Shooters. I'll be able to defend for 2 players, and then depending on what's in my hand, maybe even more. So I did draw into a backflip. So if I'm the first player, Rhino attacks me, I draw a card from my Spider Senses and backflip out of it. He then attacks, let's say it's Iron Man, or no, Iron Man would have flipped. Captain Marvel. He attacks Captain Marvel, and I say, that's cool, I can defend that. And then I Indomitable to ready. And I don't get to draw a card because he didn't initiate that attack against me. Then he attacks She-Hulk, right? And I say, okay, well, I'll defend one more time. Pretty good. And then maybe we draw a really bad Treachery, and I say, okay, well, I'm gonna, I don't know, play Get Behind Me and have him attack me. I'll get to draw a card. I draw into a Swinging Web Kick, so I'm going to take 1 attack to face. I can either play Swinging Web Kick, or I could Counterpunch on one of those previous attacks and play Armored Vest and have 1 Swinging Web Kick left. I guess I could even Swinging Web Kick and draw into a card and play Armored Vest on my second turn, so I'm back up to 4 defense. So I'm pretty happy with that opening for Spider-Man. That's a good enough mulligan test for me. Sometimes I'll do a mulligan test a couple times just to make sure everything's working out the way I want it to. But for now, we're happy with the Spider-Man deck, so we're going to call that one a day. All right. Who do we got next? Let's do Captain Marvel next really quick. So Captain Marvel is a leadership deck, and what we're going to focus on is Captain Marvel's commander ability to draw lots of cards, and her rechannel to go through cards quickly. She's got a ton of cards that focus on energy resources, as you can see. So if we get the chance, we're going to sort of focus on energy resources, but at the same time, she's got so much energy in her kit that I'm not like super worried about it. But she does have that many cards that really focus on energy resources, so we got to be a little bit careful here. We've got really big money, so we don't mind including some expensive allies as Captain Marvel, and we're going to see how that works out here with leadership. So, in leadership, we got to do our shield basics first. What am I doing? So my goal here is to show off my big money, use all my card draw, get a ton of allies out to help Spider-Man with this defense package that we're trying to work on. Alright, so shield basics. I think with Captain Marvel, because our last character is She-Hulk, and She-Hulk's got kind of a low cost curve, we're going to include 2 of each of these so that She-Hulk doesn't have to include one, because I think that's the right choice. That means we will get slightly less card draw and reduction as a team, but we're more likely to actually play them all because She-Hulk won't be focusing on other things. So that means within our basics here, we've got 3, 7, 9 cards, so a little bit more than previously. Let's go ahead and focus on our leadership cards. So we're going to finally get to 6 allies. We're going to include Vision, Hawkeye, and Maria Hill. We've got 1 lightning resource, Hawkeye, who's also a really good card to play with energy absorption. Vision, who we can pump up with our resources, and Maria to give us lots and lots and lots of card draw. So, that being said, we've got 3 pretty expensive cards there. They're cards that we want to be able to play when they come up. And the other cool thing is we can play 3 copies of Make the Call to bring them out of our discard, which will let Power of Leadership trigger even more. So we're going to put in 3 copies of Make the Call and 2 copies of Power of Leadership. So we had 9, we're up to 12, we're up to 15, we're up to 17. We need 8 more cards. I think we're going to include 3 copies of Lead from the Front, and this is for multiple reasons. We can use this to pump up She-Hulk, who next turn is going to make a readier. So we're kind of talking about how can I include cards to help another deck. That's going to be the topic of next video, but we're seeing a little preview of that here. I think I'm going to include 3 copies of Get Ready. This is a really powerful multiplayer card. It's a powerful solo card. It's just a 0-cost action to ready a hero or ready an ally. So if Vision is out there and we've pumped his attack to 4, he can now do 8 damage in 1 turn, just for 1 extra cost, which is really, really good. This is really good in multiplayer because it's an action. You can play it on other people's turns. So if Spider-Man has Black Cat out there and she's pumped up from lead from the front, you can tell Spider-Man to keep readying Black Cat and get extra damage out of her, which is really, 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 really good. So we're down to only needing 2 more cards, and we've got 3 copies of Inspired and a copy of Triskelion left. I think what I'm going to do is put in 1 of each. I put in 1 Inspired to throw onto Black Cat, and 1 Triskelion to throw in on myself to increase my ally limit. So my ally limit is 3, and I've only got 6 allies, so it's very unlikely that I'm going to get more than 3 allies out there. But because of Make the Call, it's sort of like I can go into everybody else's discard pile and get more allies. So I could actually get to my ally limit of 4. But with how much I chump block typically, which is throwing my ally in front of the bus, probably not going to happen. So we've got 5 resources in this deck, and we don't have a ton of triggers for Power of Leadership. We do have the 3 allies and the 3 lead from the fronts and the Make the Calls. So I guess we have enough. 3 Make the Calls. We've got 5 allies plus our signature ally Spider-Woman. We've got 2 copies of each of the base supports, and then 3 copies of Get Ready, 3 copies of Lead from the Front, 1 Triskelion, 1 Inspired, and that is our Captain Marvel deck. So let's do our Captain Marvel thing and see how many allies can we get onto the board on turn 1. We're not going to focus on Lead from the Fronts this early. We're really going to be focused on getting that ally train up and running. And if there was a pack I would buy to enhance this deck, it would probably be Captain America. He comes with Strength in Numbers, which is such an enabler for leadership. It lets you exhaust any number of allies to draw that many cards, which is just really, really, really crazy and good. So we're just doing a little bit of shuffle over here. Alright, we're going to see how many allies we can get into play. It's going to be a little bit rough because we've only got 6 allies in our deck, but we'll see what we can do. Maybe we can assume that there's 3-cost allies in someone else's discard pile, although other players would probably play their allies, so that's probably not a good assumption. So we've got Triskelion, Cosmic Flight, Nick Fury, Repulsor Blast. Alright, lots of things to get rid of. Let's get rid of Triskelion and Cosmic Flight for now. Let's get rid of Photonic Blast and Cosmic Flight, and just keep these 2. So Nick Fury and a Strength. Wowzers. This is going to be bonkers. Alright, so we are Carol. We're going to command our ability ourselves. So in our hand we have a Nick Fury, a Strength, an Energy Channel, an Avengers Mansion, and 2 Energy Absorptions, and a Get Ready. So we have flipped up. We are going to spend a Energy Channel and an Energy Absorption to play Nick Fury. He lets us draw 3 more cards. So we drew a Vision, a Crisis Interdiction, and a Lead from the Front. We can spend Lead from the Front, Crisis Interdiction, and Strength to play an Avengers Mansion and draw 1 more card, which is a little bit bonkers here. We got a Mockingbird, so now we have a couple choices here. We could play Vision. We wouldn't be able to pump his attack this turn, but I think the right answer is to play Mockingbird, so we stun the villain to absorb another attack. Nick Fury can thwart for 2, we can get ready on him to thwart for a second 2. We've got Vision lingering in our hands, we'd be wasting 1 card, or we could hold him for next turn. But we basically have 2 blockers. We could have thwarted for 7 on our first turn, or done 7 damage, which is pretty good for your opening hand, getting an Avengers Mansion and 2 allies out to block. Spider-Man's going to be super happy that he doesn't have to take all 4 of those blocks in, because we went a little bit crazy here as Captain Marvel. Alright, we are done with the first 3 aspects, so that leaves us with the She-Hulk Aggression deck. So, She-Hulk Aggression, huh? So She-Hulk Aggression, She-Hulk's a little bit of a struggle in the core set. She does a ton of damage. When she flips, she does 2 damage. So we're going to be flipping a lot, and we're going to depend on Captain Marvel and Tony to let us do that. But what we really like with She-Hulk is her 3 attack, and she has multiple copies of this 1-2 punch card. So that card can be really, really strong. Basically, it says after you perform a basic attack, spend 1 resource on this card to ready your hero. So we want to get that attack as high as we can, so we can use things like Captain Marvel hitting us up with lead from the front, and other things to see what we can do. And when we mulligan this one, we're going to flip and see how much damage we can do just in our opening blast of a turn. Alright, so to get there, there's a couple things we can do. Let's get our basic cards out of the way. So we are going to do Energy, Genius, and Strength, and I'm going to violate one of my rules. I'm not including Avengers Mansion or Helicarrier, because I put 2 in Captain Marvel to make sure she could get one out early. But I will have my 5 with Nick Fury and Mockingbird. So we've got 5 cards right there. Let's see what else we can build. Within aggression, we've got Power of Aggression, which is a maybe. We definitely want to take Hulk and Tigra just as allies. So we've got 5 allies. Hulk, typically in the core set, unless you're building around that physical resource, you just want to use Hulk to block. He's a big chunk blocker. Uppercut. This is one of the worst cards in the game. I'm throwing it away. Uppercut is extremely inefficient. For 3 cost, you can deal 5 damage. For 1 cost with She-Hulk, I can do 3 damage. So I could, including the cost of the card itself, play 2 1-2 punches and do 6 damage. Or, Relentless Assault exists within aggression, and it does 5 for 2. Now, it only hits a minion, which is a bit of a bummer, but we got to handle minions. Somebody's got to do it, right? So let's include 3 Relentless Assault. We want to help a little bit with thwarting since we're flipping, so we're going to include 3 Chase Them Down. We're definitely already helping with the win con, just like everybody else wanted to. I'm going to put 3 copies of Combat Training, so this is my stat buff for aggression. So again, I'm going to play this on She-Hulk. You can play it on Iron Man, you can play it on Spider-Man, so his counter punches are better. You can play it on Captain Marvel to get her up to a 3 attack. All sorts of good characters for that. The last aggression card I have left over here is Tac Team, which is like the damage version of Med Team. But being a 3-cost card, She-Hulk's kit has a lot of 3-cost cards in it. It's a pretty expensive kit, right? Superhuman Strength costs 2, Focused Rage costs 3, Ground Stomp costs 2. She's got a lot of thwarting cards that are pretty expensive, so I don't want to include too many expensive cards, so I'm going to eliminate those. Let's see what we're at with these cards here. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. We do have the 3 combat trainings, the 3 relentless, and the 2 allies, so I'll include the 2 power of aggression and see how many cards left we need to include. 7 more cards. I'm running pretty slim pickings over here. She-Hulk does have a reason to want to target a certain HP value, so I'm going to include 2 copies of First Aid just so she can, get really low in health but then still recover without tanking the team. So we need 5 more cards. Alright, well, left in our hand are Haymaker, Emergency, and 4 copies of Tenacity. So maybe I'm regretting not putting Power, Uppercut, or Tac Team in there, but I don't think I regret it that much. I think what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to include 3 copies of this Tenacity. It's not super efficient, but it does let you combo super hard on turns when Captain Marvel plays lead from the front on you. So Tenacity is an upgrade you play that later you spend a physical resource and discard it to ready your hero. So here's the combo that we'd be looking for late game, our 2-deck combo that we're going to talk about in the next video here. We would have Combat Training on She-Hulk, so she is up to 4 damage. Maybe I would have already played 2 copies of Tenacity, and I have a 1-2 punch. I'm going to flip up, so I'm going to have 6 cards in my hand. Let's say these are the 6 cards, right? So I flip up, and I deal 2 damage to the villain. I swing for... Captain Marvel plays lead from the front on me, so I swing for 5 instead of 4, so I'm now up to 7 damage. I can then play 1-2 punch to go to 12 damage, play 1-2 punch to go to 17 damage, and then I can ready with Tenacity to go to whatever 17 plus 5 is, 22, and then I can use Combat Training again with the second Tenacity to go to 27. Now that's a huge resource investment up front, but at the end of the day, that was only 3 cards in play for me, and 1 card coming into play from Captain Marvel. Now it's wombo combo-y, right? But that's some of the most fun times we have in Marvel Champions. Alright, so this is what we're going to do with She-Hulk. We're going to assume that we're going to flip up and deal as much damage as we can, and then we're going to flip back down and play through the first 2 turns and just assume that we can face tank whatever the villain throws at us, and it doesn't hurt us too bad. Just see how much damage we can rack up real quick. Because we are going to be the face-punching She-Hulk that the core set seems to to think that we could be. I know we can do it. You all know that too, right? All right, let's take our opening 6. We've got Ground Snap, Power Progression, Haymaker, Mockingbird, Focused Rage, Focused Rage. All right, that is a lot of garbage. we're going to keep one Focused Rage, throw everything else away, and hope we draw into a double resource, because card draw isn't going to hurt us as we go along our way. And wow, did we ever get some pretty crummy draws here. Maybe we can get some tenacity action going. We'll see. So we're going to use First Aid, Power Progression, and Gamma Slam to play Focused Rage. We're going to flip up and deal 2 damage, so we're up to 2. We'll take 1 and draw a card from Focused Rage. It's a combat training. We'd much rather play that than 1-2 punch for now, so we're going to swing for 4. That's 6 damage in our first turn. We get to draw 4 cards. Villain phase happens, we take some amount of damage. Alright, so let's draw 1 more card. And we're going to play through this in 2 turns because we've got Split Personality here. We can pay 3 cards to play Split Personality. That lets us flip and then draw up to our hand size. And now we've got 2 1-2 punches in hand to do things with. So we did, 2 plus 4 last turn. So we did 6 damage, so now we're up to 8 damage. We can swing for 4 with the first 1-2 punch to go to 12, and then ready and go to 16. We can use Hellcat and another 1-2 punch to go to 20 damage, and then we can play a First Aid to heal up the 2 damage we took from Focused Rage. So we've probably taken 1 villain attack and an encounter card. We've dealt 20 damage and ramped our board pretty well. So I'm pretty happy with that opening draw, She-Hulk, even though the original mulligan wasn't great. It still worked out in the end. So these are our 4 decks. We have Iron Man Justice, we have Spider-Man Protection, we have Captain Marvel Leadership, and we have She-Hulk Aggression. I think these decks could pair up in 2-player in any way. I think that Protection Aggression might struggle a little bit, but as long as you include one of these 2 decks, you're probably going to be pretty okay in 2-player. And 4-player, this deck's going to rock the core set for you. At least I hope it will. So I'll try it out in some gameplay streams this month. Hope you picked up some tips on deck building out of the core set. If anybody else has a favorite core set only deck that they love, or ideas or tips and tricks for building within the core set, please let people know. And if you have any ideas of what your top pack would be to increase the value of Spider-Man Protection, She-Hulk Aggression, Iron Man Justice, or Captain Marvel Leadership, please let me know. I would tell you to pick up Venom for Sonic Rifle here. I would tell you to pick up Captain America for Strength in Numbers with Captain Marvel. I would tell you to pick up probably Rise of Red Skull for She-Hulk, because I think you get, does that come with Earth's Mightiest Heroes? And it comes with Spider-Girl, so you'd get 3 Avengers allies and even more readies for your deck, which is really good. And for Spider-Man, I'd probably pick up Vision for Defiance, because that's a really good card that can make it guaranteed that Spider-Man doesn't take any damage when he defends. So that was our deck build. The deck builds lists for these and really short synopsis write-ups are available in the YouTube description or the podcast notes, so be sure to check those out. Like them and leave comments if you have questions about how to build with these characters within the core set, or if you have recommendations of things you would swap out to make these decks a little bit more playable and synergistic. So next week we will have a video on combo building within multiplayer. We'll talk about a She-Hulk and Captain Marvel deck that I built someone for the MCM Holiday Deck List Exchange that we did last year. So they've played them a couple times, I've played them a couple times, and I made some tweaks to them, and I want to talk through how you can go about building a deck with the 2 core set heroes, but we're going to expand to the full card pool and look at how you would build a deck that really synergizes between the 2, where one character, like here, She-Hulk is just taking from Captain Marvel, but we're going to try to build decks where they can pass things back and forth, if you will. Alright, that wraps it up for today. I hope our S.H.I.E.L.D. agents are learning a lot about Marvel Champions. You're getting some great games in and having an awesome January. Thanks for tuning in, and have a great day.